Hey everybody, Joe here. Got another show for you today. So my last video on how we're winning a lot of liberal bots, like I'm pretty sure they're from bot farms or talking points, were the saying that liberals use right now. We had one guy say that you can't tell me the economy's getting better because I just paid $45 for ribeye steak. It's like that's one of the most expensive steaks you could ever buy, and tariffs don't have anything to do with the meat that we're getting. In fact, we've worked out a deal with Argentina to bring in extra beef until our beef production can be raised here in the country, which means we need more cattle ranchers. There's a shortage of cattle ranchers. I've covered this on past shows. It's not an easy solution to fix, but like expanding their market to other countries, that's something Trump's working on. So that tells me that it was another probably Chinese bot working around in my comments. Anyway, if you're one of these people and you show up in my comments, I'm just going to mute you from the channel. The next time you comment, nobody will see it except you. I don't have time for stupid shit like that. But I wanted to do a follow-up to that video so that we can cover tariffs and talk about how tariffs work versus what the Democrats' plan would have been and has been in the past. So let's start here. We're going to do a little educational video and we will see how it goes. Give me a sec here. I'm just trying to find the right tab. There we go. Okay, so let's bring that up on screen. This is a little bit of a history of tariffs. It's coming from History Behind the Headlines on YouTube. Let's go ahead and play that for us.
Everyone is talking about the history of American tariffs, but what does the past actually tell us? After gaining independence in 1776, the new US government needed revenue. The Tariff Act of 1789, signed by President Washington, imposed a 5% tariff on nearly all imports. Alexander Hamilton, the first Treasury Secretary, emerged as the intellectual leader of the protectionist movement. In his influential Report on Manufactures,
and of course, one of the left's favorite plays is Hamilton.
Hamilton argued that new domestic industries required temporary protection from foreign competition. He believed this protection would eventually lead to cheaper domestic products once industries reached maturity. Between 1816 and the end of World War II, the United States maintained one of the world's highest average import tariffs on all manufactured goods. By 1820, the average tariff rate had reached about 40%. The American Civil War, starting in 1861, was partly triggered by the tariff question. Southern agricultural states opposed protection, while northern industrial states favored it. Abraham Lincoln.
Now, isn't it something that the Democrats of today align with the Democrats of the past in the South, the slave owners, the people who fought against ending slavery and stuff? Isn't it funny how they keep repeating these cycles with just slightly changed narratives, right? Back then it was we can't allow blacks to vote, so they created the KKK. Now they're doing the whole race thing, but they've reversed the roles and saying that white people are the bad ones. We got to do something about them. But anyway, here, let's take a listen.
Henry Clay Tariff Whig implemented a 44% tariff during the Civil War. From 1871 to 1913, tariffs on dutiable imports never fell below 38%. During this period, America's gross national product grew at 4.3% annually, outpacing Free Trade Britain. But as America's industries caught up with Europe in the 1890s, the justification for protection evolved. Initially, tariffs were justified as protecting infant industries. Now the argument shifted to maintaining workers' wages, supporting agriculture, and making sure trade was reciprocal. The Republican platform of 1896 declared protection the bulwark of American industrial independence. According to economist Ha-Ju Chang, America's protectionist period corresponded with its fastest economic growth in the 19th and early 20th centuries. But the tariff became a partisan issue in the late 19th century. Tariff protection served as the ideological cement holding the Republican coalition together from the Civil War onward. Republicans promised businesses higher sales, workers higher wages, and farmers higher demand, while Democrats portrayed tariffs as taxes on ordinary people. The Northeast strongly supported tariffs, and the South and West opposed them, with the Midwest serving as the crucial battleground. In 1887, Democrat President Grover Cleveland attacked tariffs as indefensible extortion. The 1888 election was fought.
Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny? It's like we hear about it today. These are the same people who, as I pointed out in a few videos now, they elected Abigail Spassberger in Virginia, and the first thing she did was they're working on passing all these taxes that are going to raise the cost of living, the daily life for everybody in Virginia to a ridiculous amount. Look at New York. Look at California. I mean, these people kill me with this stuff. It's the same story from these people forever. They just try to pawn it off on other people as though it's them that are the problem, when it's actually, the Democrats and their anti-tariff, pro-tax BS. So what he's saying is that there's another president who does that. And then what's even funnier, just before we go on, is that after Democrat voters, liberal voters, vote for these leaders and destroy an entire state over and over and over and over, they keep voting for higher taxes and crazy laws and just crazy this, crazy that. They get fed up, they leave, they move to a red state, and then they demand that they flip that state blue as well. And then they try to destroy that state. They're like a virus. They're like an actual virus that spreads and destroys things. So it's just actually funny that this is not anything new. The Democrats demonized the thing that actually was keeping the country healthy and happy and protected as far as industry goes and, well, jobs and so on.
Over tariffs, with Cleveland losing to the protectionist Republicans. William McKinley defended protection by arguing it kept money, markets, and manufacturers at home for the benefit of our own people. Democrats briefly returned to power with Cleveland's 1892 victory and attempted to lower rates with the Tariff Act of 1894. This reduced overall rates from 50% to 42%, but the bill contained so many protectionist clauses, Cleveland refused to sign it. It eventually became law anyway. McKinley's successful 1896 campaign promised protection and prosperity, leading to the Dingley Tariff of 1897 that restored rates to 50%. The Republican Party later split over the Payne-Aldrich Tariff of 1909, with the Midwestern Republicans opposing the bill. They felt favored Northeastern interests. Democrats eventually reduced rates with the Underwood Tariff of 1913. However, Republicans returned to high tariffs with the Fordney-Macomber Tariff of 1922 and the Smoot-Hawley Tariff of 1930 at the start of the Great Depression. The 1930 Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act intended to address the Great Depression, but backfired when other countries retaliated with their own tariffs and bilateral trade deals, causing American imports and exports to plummet. A significant shift occurred in 1934 when Congress passed the Reciprocal Tariff Act, delegating authority to the executive branch to negotiate bilateral tariff reduction agreements. After World War II, the US promoted the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, GATT, later becoming the World Trade Organization, in 1995, establishing an open market, low-tariff ideology that became globally dominant by the 1990s.
And we're gonna get into that in a moment. What happened in the 90s under Clinton?
American industries faced global competition after 1970. Protection took new forms. Rather than high tariffs, quotas and voluntary import restrictions were negotiated, as with Japanese automobiles. President Reagan and Bush abandoned protectionist policies, embracing free trade agreements, including NAFTA, in 1994. Though tariffs generally decreased, certain sectors, like agriculture, remain protected. In recent years, tariffs have returned to prominence under President Trump, who in his first term imposed duties on solar panels, washing machines, steel and aluminium, and escalated a trade war with China. Studies indicated these tariffs reduced real income and adversely affected US GDP. However, it's interesting to note President Biden maintained most of these tariffs while adjusting a few. He dropped tariffs on European steel, but expanded those on Chinese goods, such as EVs and semiconductors. Overall, America has a long history of high tariffs, briefly interrupted by the liberalization of trade from the 1950s to the 2020s. Trump seems keen to overturn that consensus and return to the high tariff days, restructuring the US economy. Economically, tariffs benefited America in the 1800s, but 200 years later, is that still a policy which can work in a globalized world? We will have to wait and see.
And it is working. There will be pain. in the process. Trump made that clear. He said that. We had Scott Bessent come out last year and say tariffs are going to keep us, we'll be fine on tariffs for a while because these companies have purchased ahead of time after the election was won, front loaded the stock and so on. That's going to run out. That's going to cause a little bit of a price hike. However, let's take a look at what Bill Clinton did. The globalist GWB there, George H.W. Bush, rather, he initiated the free trade agreement. The guy that was like a new world order, that guy. Then Clinton, who loved it, oversaw the ratification of it. And we then proceeded to watch jobs plummet in this country. We saw ghettos that were once thriving communities pretty much start popping up, Ohio, Indiana, so on and so forth, because Clinton decided, we're going to tax these businesses as well on top of it. So that's when we got the idea, that wasn't the first time, but that's when these companies started moving some of their money offshore, which does not help our country. They started moving their production to other countries that didn't tax them as high. And by the mid-2000s, the choices Clinton made in both the housing market and also in this particular sector, we saw ghettos and we saw homelessness just skyrocket. We saw... It was absolutely insane. It's absolutely insane. So they called it Clintonomics back then. It included eliminating protectionist tariffs as one of the main four goals, along with fiscal discipline, human capital investment, and tech research. Interesting, because that's part of Trump's plan to some degree, right? Fiscal discipline. We cut with Doge. We cut the government down. The government is the slowest growing sector now. There's less jobs being hired into the government than ever before. We got rid of the bloat in U.S. aid and folded that into the State Department so that it can be overseen better, not its own little money laundering scheme for Democrats and rhinos and all these people and so on. NGOs. Human capital investment. Trump look at the gold card. Look at the jobs for Americans. We saw a huge increase in jobs. Like 100,000 something, way over. It was only expected to be at like 40,000 jobs or something, and we ended up with 130,000 this year, and it blew right past the forecast from economists who were looking at 55 to 80,000. These are all American jobs, right? I talked about this in my last video. So what you get from these bots, and I'm sure maybe a couple of the 12 comments were actual people. But what you get is they're like, now, because we live in that society, the TikTok society, the Uber Eats society. You click a button, something shows up soon, right? Very soon. And in some cases, within the day, Amazon does like all kinds of quick deliveries like that in a lot of areas, not here. But so you live in this instant gratification society where they aren't willing to do anything that might hurt them for a short term. For the greater benefit. You hear liberals say greater good all the time, but they're usually talking about socialism, which is basically communism, which basically means we all suck together. We're all just fucked together. Like, and the people pushing it, mind you, are the same ones that are trading in Congress right now. Your Presleys and your in the squad and all that, who have become millionaires since joining. They don't want socialism for them. They want it for you, is the point. The ones that live behind gated fences while they talk about stolen land, nobody's illegal, all this and that. And, Billie Eilish just had a guy banned from America, deported from America because he told a joke about he's coming to her house to take it, since nobody, stolen land and all that. That's a story that's trending right now. So anyway, so after he signed all that, and Clinton signed all that, we saw the drain on the economy. They were like, nope, no protectionism, and we're going to tax the hell out of you. And what did that do? Boom, everything left for overseas. This is a known fact. This isn't something that we're hiding. This isn't something that people don't know, okay? You'll have Democrats that are like, oh, that's just Republican bullshit. We watched it happen. I was alive then, right? I was younger, but I remember it happening. So yeah, then we've got this. So one of the points to the tariffs, and by the way, I will add, if Democrats were in charge, they'd be taxing the crap out of people, companies, and so on. They'd be taxing the crap out of these companies, and that gets passed along to you as well, right? Nobody is saying that tariffs don't get passed along to the consumer, but for the longest time, this country thrived on tariffs, and nobody even thought twice about it being passed along because that was the price of stuff. And when we've got prices that we are bringing down already through different measures, trade agreements, businesses coming back, and then, for example, you've got people that are like, well, we need our drugs to be made overseas because they get paid $6 to $7 in slave camps in China to produce my iPhone. I hate capitalism, but I got this iPhone that was produced on slave labor. So therefore, that's better because we're paying them less. If we bring it back here, you're looking at an expensive, even more expensive iPhone because they want to pay their employees more. Well, you can thank the communist unions. Yes, they were started by socialists and communists and gangsters, actually. And they have fought to raise the wage of the worker, whether you see that as good or bad. I'm sure if you were in a union, you see that as good. But at the same time, these Democrat unions who now kind of swap for Trump because of tariffs, by the way, another thing that they don't like us to say, now that they, have fought and brought wages up and all this, yeah, stuff's going to be a little bit more expensive if we produce it in America. But guess what? Over time, that comes down because we get more efficient with it. That's how that works. And then you're producing more. So there's competition in pricing. Okay. That's how that works. This is how economics works. If they would teach this in school rather than, how a boy can be a girl and I can be a unicorn and I need a litter box in the bathroom or whatever. If they were teaching actual economics in school, I wouldn't have retards in my comments. I'm just saying they'd understand this. So let's take a look at this video. This is coming from the channel. Let me show you, give him credit. Promethean Action Science. Okay. I mean, this guy, he, kind of monotone or whatever, but listen to what he says. This is an important point. This illustrates what Trump is trying to do.
And tariffs work. Just look at the new aluminum. The results are in. Tariffs work. Just look at the new aluminum plant being built in Oklahoma. This will be the first new U.S. aluminum plant in over 45 years. It will double U.S. production, and it will operate at the highest levels of productivity. But didn't the so-called experts tell us tariffs would be disastrous, driving up prices and causing inflation? The reality is Trump's tariffs work because he's embracing the American system of economics. Real wealth doesn't come from chasing the cheapest labor or the cheapest goods. It comes from investing in and developing the productive powers of the working class.
And I couldn't have said it better myself. You're chasing cheaper goods at the expense of the entire country, right? We were conditioned by Reagan. I mean, Trump likes Reagan. I don't get why. I've looked back on some of the things he did, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't like that guy as much as everybody else seems to like him. Did he seem like an all right guy? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying I hate the guy, but I don't think everything that he did was great either. I just don't. But there is the point where cheap shit is what we've been conditioned. Why were we conditioned to accept cheap shit made by slave labor? It seems kind of evil, don't you think? And if you don't think that, I would say there's something wrong with you. I mean, for example, Magic the Gathering cards. I don't play or anything, but I was just reading an article about how their stockholders and shareholders and stuff are really pissed off because they've mass produced these cheap, shitty cards so much that they've lost all their value, right? They used to be valuable. That's what we've done with American labor and American production. We imported it overseas or exported it overseas only to import cheap, crappy shit. There's no other, I don't know how else to explain it. I mean, there's cars on the road that held up better than cars you buy today, right? From long ago when we were building things ourselves here with pride, with craftsmanship, not just pumped out by some crappy slave market labor, sweatshop This was things were put together better. Things lasted longer. There's jokes that you hear comedians tell about their grandmother still having the same stove that she had when they got married. Her and her husband got married, and this, it's the year 2010 or something. I mean, things were better. That's what make America great again means. The left wants to say it's about racism and all this because they're idiots. But it's really about, let's just make things better here. Why are we making things better elsewhere? So let's listen to what else he has to say.
And tariffs, when done right, are a key tool for creating an economy that generates real wealth. My name is Ben Deniston. I'm one of the primary authors of Promethean Actions ebook, What President Trump Can Do with the American System 2.0. And I've been studying the science underlying the American system for 15 years. In this video, we're going to examine how this new Oklahoma aluminum plant proves the effectiveness of well-conceived tariffs. Then we'll show why President Trump's tariffs aren't inflationary. Finally, we'll show how the American system is key to generating real economic growth. If you didn't hear already, a new aluminum production plant will more than double current U.S. primary aluminum production, operating at the highest levels of productivity in the industry. This is a direct product of President Trump's 50% aluminum tariff, coupled with his strict no exemptions policy.
And we're going to be doing this with drug companies and many other companies, auto manufacturers, everything you can think of. And we're going to win the war on AI, right? Some of you don't care about AI, but that's where the world's headed. Sorry, it is. So to claim that this is all bad somehow means that you have very little foresight and very short-sightedness and a lack of critical thinking skills and a lack of ability to look at the big picture and understand and grasp what's happening right now and appreciate it, because you need instant gratification.
Policy. As Peter Navarro summarized in his excellent January 27th article, this deal between Century Aluminum and Emirates Global Aluminum will create the first new U.S. primary aluminum production plant in over 45 years. Beyond its use in household goods, aluminum is a critical mineral for modern industry and defense. The failed policies of globalization have left the U.S. vulnerable, relying on imports for 85% of our primary aluminum.
And not just that, everything else. Remember COVID. I can't say this enough. Trump had to build supply bridges to appease the Democrats who kept coming up with reasons we couldn't open unless we had A, B, C, or D. And so the reason he had to do that was because we made nothing here, right? Not a thing, not enough of anything. And we were relying on everyone else. That's not a future for your kids. That's not a future for you. That's not a future for anyone who lives in this country. If you don't like this country and you don't want it to be successful, find one you do like and move there.
But beyond this common sense defense and security, this is an excellent case study to illustrate the science behind successful tariffs. As President Trump said in his January 30th op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, countless so-called experts, including those featured frequently in the Wall Street Journal, predicted confidently that the Trump tariffs would crash the stock markets, crush economic growth, cause massive inflation, destroy American exports, and trigger a worldwide recession. 9 months later, the results are in. Every one of those predictions has proven completely and totally wrong. We have proven decisively that properly applied tariffs do not hurt growth, they promote growth and greatness. Crucially, President Trump emphasized economic growth does not cause inflation. In fact, often it does the opposite. Why is this the case? Let's look at this new aluminum plant as a case study. They'll be using the latest technology from Emirates Global Aluminum, what they call EX technology, which enables the highest levels of productivity. According to the coverage, with a workforce of 1,000 people, the new plant will have an annual production of 750,000 tons. That's 750 tons per worker per year. At the peak of U.S. aluminum production in 1980, productivity was less than 150 tons per worker per year. So this new plant represents a 5-fold leap over the productivity of earlier technologies. This productivity leap is key to understanding why tariffs are not inflationary When properly used, they're key to real economic growth. The go-to definition of inflation is often phrased as too much money chasing too few goods. And sure, if you're increasing the money supply without changing the number of goods produced, resulting inflation makes sense. But what if we are increasing real physical productivity like we're beginning to see with President Trump's tariffs? To illustrate what this type of productivity growth looks like, take the history of U.S. iron and steel production as an example. With the development of new technologies from 1880 to 1900, U.S. iron and steel productivity more than doubled, going from 33 tons per worker per year to 70. From 1900 to 1960, it nearly doubled again, going from 70 to 127 tons per worker per year. Total production skyrocketed, but throughout this process, the relative percentage of the labor force engaged in iron and steel production remained essentially the same, at about 0.75%. So with increases in physical productivity, the same relative labor force can produce more of what society needs to survive. That is, more goods produced per productive worker. Without a change in the credit and money supplies, this can actually be deflationary. Too little money chasing too many goods. And increasing credit and money supplies can be needed. The point is, inflation isn't simply a monetary phenomenon. We have to look at the more important underlying processes of physical production. To further illustrate this, let's take a counterexample of inflation created by lowering physical productivity, looking at Joe Biden's 2021 green energy goal of generating 100% CO2-free electricity by 2035.
Yeah, a country killer. That's what that is. I don't care that Elon supports it. It is a country killer. Listen, he's bringing facts right now.
With a primary focus on wind and solar. The problem is wind and solar are intermittent and they're very low power density, meaning you need massive numbers of windmills and solar panels to generate sufficient levels of power. One useful way to quantify this is by looking at the total amount of material inputs needed to generate a given amount of energy. If we look at aluminum, copper, steel, cement, and other material inputs, the life cycle requirements per unit energy for wind and solar are 10 to 30 times higher than coal, natural gas, or nuclear. If we apply that physical economic reality to Biden's 2021 green energy plan, it would have more than doubled the material requirements to generate the same amount of electricity, from 13 million tons per year to 34 million tons per year. Same electricity generated, more goods required. Biden's pursuit of this green energy fantasy was lowering the physical productivity of energy generation. This didn't only impact energy, but everything that energy touches in the economy, which is essentially the entire economy. The inflation of the Biden years wasn't just from a monetary policy. It was also a physical economic consequence of forcing the economy to adopt inferior green policies. Beneath all the monetary manipulations, from interest rates to money supply, and behind all the behaviorist assessments, from consumer confidence to investor sentiment, there is a real physical economy that is determined by the level of culture and productivity of your population. And if you're not acting on improving that, everything else is meaningless. And President Trump clearly gets this. Real wealth comes from building things, employing new technologies, and developing your labor force, not chasing the cheapest labor for the largest monetary profit. As President Trump's trade representative Jameson Greer stated at Davos, this is the American system of economics at work. The American system is rooted in the work of Alexander Hamilton. For example, Hamilton's report on the subject of manufacturers had a specific goal: to argue against the newly formed United States remaining an exporter of unfinished agricultural goods to the British Empire, and instead developing advanced domestic manufacturing and becoming an industrial nation. While the Revolutionary War secured political sovereignty, Hamilton's work was the key to securing economic sovereignty. In this Keystone report, Hamilton recognized that value comes from increasing the productive powers of labor through employing machinery and technology. The employment of machinery forms an item of great importance in the general masses of national industry. 'Tis an artificial force brought in aid of the natural force of man, and, to all the purposes of labor, is an increase of hands. an ascension of strength unencumbered too by the expense of maintaining the laborer. True wealth doesn't come from money or gold or even just the exchange of goods. Hamilton recognized that increasing the productive powers of labor is the central factor. This requires tariffs to protect your workers and industries from cheap labor and manipulation abroad, public credit and national banking to ensure sovereignty from globalist financier cartels, and internal improvements to build up the infrastructure needed to support an advanced productive economy. This is the framework that became known as the American system, and it's rooted in an understanding of mankind as a creator. So, President Trump was right and the so-called experts were wrong. Well-conceived tariffs don't cause inflation. They work to grow the economy. Look at the new Oklahoma aluminum plant as an example. Not only the first aluminum plant since 1980, not only doubling U.S. production capacity, but doing all of this at the highest levels of productivity. This is just one isolated example of the fundamental reasons why the American system works. True progress comes from human creativity, requiring a well-paid and well-educated productive class that's able to innovate, discover, develop new technologies, and build businesses that increase physical productivity. As we've painfully learned over the past decades of failed globalism, true wealth doesn't come from chasing the cheapest goods and the cheapest labor. It comes from fostering the creativity of your population and viewing your population as creators made in the image of God. This is why the American system works. If you appreciate this type of big picture,
Yes. And I'm glad to see that there are 1.3K people with brains and only 7 people without. This is what the election in 2024 was all about. This ratio here. So there you have it, guys. Now, the thing I'll leave you with is something others have said. This isn't I'm not some genius for saying it. It's just a repeated talking point, but it's a fact. You look at these other countries that have, well, the ones that haven't imported the third world by en masse, but you look at these other countries and American, why do they have that light rail and we don't? So on and so forth. It's because they have tariffs. That's why. It's simple. It's because all these other countries have always had tariffs on everybody, including us, Canada included. And that's why I laughed when Canadians started melting and freaking out when Trump was like, okay, well, you're doing like in some cases 200% tariffs on us, so we're going to start tariffing you. And they melted down. It's okay for them to do it, but it's not okay for America to do it. At some point, you've got to wake up, just kind of step out of your slumber and understand that for this country to make it and this country to thrive, which I know most lefties don't want to happen, they want this country to be destroyed. Every time they riot, they illustrate that. But for this country to succeed, we need to change our path. We can't continue mass immigration with 80% of Somalians plus being on welfare after living here 10 years. Mass illegal immigration, open borders, welfare programs coming out the butt, U.S. aid programs, supporting failing news broadcasts that prop up one side over the other. We can't do these things. We just can't. Wars going on all over the country, all over the world, all the time that we're dumping money into, even though they don't really affect us. This has to stop. That's why he ended the wars that he ended. He's still working on one. But, he understands that if those wars are there, that gives Congress a reason to want to send these people money, right? We can't have it. All right. So I just wanted to do that little coverage of tariffs. Hopefully it helped you understand them a little better. And, look to Oklahoma to see the beginnings of the 2020s. So we're in February and this is starting to happen as predicted. We're starting to see these operations begin. Some places were being built as of, what was it? I think early fall last year, mid-fall, somewhere in there, some of the drug factories and there's broken ground for, I do believe, some of the car plants. But at the end of the day, that's the only way you bring business home, is you make America a business who is a competitor to other countries, and you make it so that America is looked at as there's a reason to bring jobs back to this country. Whereas under the globalists of the 90s, let's say, we pretty much did everything we could to make sure that there was not any manufacturing here, no jobs, everything was outsourced, and we were getting cheap crap, largely from China, who hates us, by the way. And that's what they wanted to continue. And that's another reason why they hate Trump, and that's why the demons on the left spew evil shit about Trump, is because they can see that he's trying to restore sanity in this country and restore the economy to the way it was intended to be in this country. And they don't want that. It messes with their global new world order. Anyway, guys, that's what I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, leave me a like. That is the only thing that's going to really help me get the word out on YouTube. Obviously, it works because I'm getting liberal bots in my comments. So anyway, guys, peace out. Have a good night.